Hey everybody, we're live. We made it. I'm sorry for the delay. We had some last-minute internet woes, as what occasionally happens. Do apologize. Thank you so much for sticking around and waiting for us to start. But here we are, part 2 of the Highgate Vampire Saga. Part two. Let's bring in the rest of the guys here. Joining me is the co-host of Nocturnal Frequency Radio, Mr. Alex Rondini. What's up, Alex?
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I bid you
again. I forgot
welcome.
my fangs.
I know,
Apologize.
man. Come on. And in the
my
back,
eyes.
I
left my eyes.
Your eyes,
closet.
yeah. In the background there, you hear giggling away the maniacal laughter, of course, of Mr. Justin Villarini. What up, Justin?
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. And you might be wondering where Steve is. Steve Genier could not be with us tonight, although that may change. He might appear later on, but he's having some major computer issues. I was just saying to the guys before we started, it's like every week when we do it, at least one person has a computer issue where something will go wrong, except Alex. Alex
He gets a gold
So
star.
far,
he's immune.
knock
so
on
far,
wood here.
so
Hold
far,
on.
he's immune. But we'll wait and see. Steve might pop in in a minute or two, or whenever the case may be. But if not, we will soldier forth and get through this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed last week's show. Justin wasn't here last week, so I want to go to Justin first and ask him about the Highgate Vampire and how he first discovered this very strange tale, a modern vampire tale. In the late 20th century. Justin, how did you first discover the Highgate Vampire?
Of course, being a paranormal researcher, you try to read as many books as you possibly can. And although the book that I can't remember the name, it's like Vampires something, but it was more of a historical take, and it went through many cases, and one of them was brought up was the Highgate. It didn't focus on David and the rest of the crew. It was more focused on the lore, and that's where it started. Eventually, I think it was maybe the early 2000s. I saw the the In Search of Highgate, I think it was a couple clips or something like that where David was being interviewed or part of a documentary, and that was literally the first time I was introduced to someone involved with the Highgate, and it was really David Ferrand, right off the bat. And then we could say almost a decade later, Alex and Steve had David on numerous times, actually, a handful of times, and I got to be on there a few times myself with David, and that's how I got to know David. And we talked about all sorts of things, not vampire related, but
he was very much into paranormal research, especially the occult.
Yeah,
he was a
huge
Wiccan high priest.
Which is some of the things that got him in trouble, actually.
And you probably had a lot of things in common with him as far as stuff like that.
Yeah, we I think it was a couple times I brought up we talked about occult stuff and magical philosophies, and there was a couple things that I noted, and from then on I think just me and David hit it off from there. I mean, we didn't talk a lot, but every once in a while in private message or even when we were on chat after the show, we would just briefly talk about. I actually wanted to get him on to talk more about the occult aspect of things, but I never did. Yeah.
I always tried to get him to talk about that stuff too. I remember when I met him, I started asking him about some of because Highgate Cemetery in northern London, throughout the 1960s and maybe the early part of the 1970s, it was a kind of mecca. For Satanists, and there was a satanic group that was active in the cemetery for many years. And
stories go back I think to early 1900s.
When David discovered this, and there's many photographs, I can probably pull one up in a second, where he went into one of the tombs, and the tomb was drawn all of these symbols and all where they had some kind of ceremony in the tomb. And I remember asking him about that. And when it was publicized and it made the papers, he would actually get death threats. He would get letters from people. Now, here's the crazy part. He would get letters from people, telling him, we're coming to get you. You need to stop talking about this. But some of the letters that he got were written in blood.
Oh, wow.
Whether or not that was human blood,
Yeah.
Who knows? But it was written in blood, Mr.
And whose
Renfield.
blood was it?
Well, that's the thing. We don't know. You know, for all we know, it was red pen. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, but he said it. He
Kool-Aid.
said it was you know, it was blood. But fascinating stuff. Alex, I know last week we asked you the same question, but where did we leave off last week? I can't even remember where we left off.
It was hard to remember where we left off. So we talked quite a bit about a few things about Highgate, but if let's reiterate how I got to know David.
Yeah.
Is basically Steve had gone in contact with him and asked him to come on the show. Prior to that, I had no idea about Highgate at all, to be honest with you. Even though I'm a fan, let's say, not a fanatic, but a fan of vampires. And you'd think I would know something about that or have read something about that, but I had no idea about Highgate Vampire until David was brought onto the show and to discuss what went on and what transpired in all of those, years since the 70s between him and Manchester. And it was very interesting. I mean, we didn't get into the actual vampire part, except for the fact that, Sean claimed to have staked him,
right?
Not at the cemetery, but at another residence.
A neo-Gothic mansion.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what he always said.
Yeah, exactly. So we didn't really discuss too much the vampire aspect of it, except for that aspect. But we talked a lot about, the battles back and forth between the two and his take and David's take. And then we just talked a lot about the paranormal because, as you said, he was interested in the paranormal as well. And we would our conversations may start one way, but they always indefinitely veered off to wherever they took us with the paranormal and wherever else the interests lay. Right.
Well,
but yeah, that's about it.
What was your take though, Alex? Because you've always been a fan of the vampire mythos in literature, in movies. You've always loved that stuff. When you were confronted with a story that happened not that long ago, 50 years ago, that potentially told the story of a real vampire infestation in the West that made the news, that was on television, that made the newspapers. What was your take? Were you immediately like, well, this is obviously bullshit, or, oh, wow, this is fascinating. What's going on here?
Well, a bit of both. I knew it was bullshit, just primarily because even though I'm a fan of vampires, it doesn't mean I'm gullible enough to think that they exist. At least not your typical Hollywood type vampires, or even the literal walking undead, so to speak. So I knew right off the bat that it was pretty much a sensationalized story for Manchester's own gain and notoriety purposes, right? However, that being said, I know that there are a lot of people in the world today who view themselves to be literal vampires. That feel the need to drink other people's blood in order to, well, I don't even know the real reason for it. Some claim because it helps them to revitalize themselves, because they're lacking certain things, and by drinking other people's blood, it sort of fulfills that need that they can't otherwise get. There was even I can't remember the person's name, but there was even a self-proclaimed vampire high priest, I guess, for lack of a better term. He belonged to some coven, who was actually on TV years and years ago. And he made the claim that when he drank people's blood, it enhanced his strength.
Right.
And he went on to do or try to do certain things on camera to prove his point. But hey, whatever. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things.
So are you Justin agreeing there? Do you know? Are you familiar with this, Justin?
No, but I mean, I'm familiar with, I guess, certain explanations for vampirism, and I mean, that would be part of it. There's actually clinical explanations as well as psychological explanations, and some of that is that some people are limited or don't have enough certain nutrients in their blood, and it causes them to have a taste for blood. I forget the name of that, but that's one. And then of course there's the psychological aspect where people just think they're vampires. So I'm certain that there's a mix in between with some people where maybe it's a little of that and a little psychological, where it's almost kind of like a just like the enhancement aspect. They think it's happening, and that's really what's powering them.
Right.
Yeah. Just a good question actually in the chat.
Yeah, I just saw that. Evil Earl. Let me pull it up here.
Evil Earl and Studley Constable asked, "What is an energy vampire?"
He says, Evil says I know a few legit energy vampires.
Yeah.
And then Studley Constable says, "What is an energy vampire?" Anyone want to tackle this?
Sure. I guess that would be most definitely like a psychic vampire. Is that right, Alex?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So essentially, energy vampires, psychic vampires are almost synonymous.
Yes.
You have essentially, if you ever heard of an author called Konstantinos?
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's the book I read. It might be by him.
Yeah. It's probably, you probably did. It was one of the more popular ones back maybe a decade ago, or I don't remember exactly when it was published. But nevertheless, he wrote the book on how to protect yourself against energy/psychic vampires. And what it is basically, one of the analogies I believe he used was, you ever been to a party and you're having a grand old time, and then all of a sudden this guy comes in and it just feels like the energy just got drained out of the room and it just went to shit.
I got a better one.
Yeah.
You ever been on a podcast when that happens?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Alex. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. So what are you trying to say? That I'm an energy vampire? So essentially, energy vampires basically tap into your life force and drain you of your energy life force. Interesting story if you want to hear it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So back, I'd say around 2003, 2004 time frame, I was with a bunch of friends at a restaurant, and we were sitting down in the patio, and I was feeling kind of drained. I was kind of tired. It was one of those, it was one of those days when I just didn't have enough energy in me. So, and I always like to try new things, or kind of. So I'm sitting with my friends, and one of my friends is the same, I don't know if you remember, Gareth, that same person who came with me that I got the EVP in a psychiatric hospital, my friend Jen, who says she's sensitive to energies.
Yeah.
She was there as well at this instance. And what I was trying to do, I was trying to visualize me getting energy from this group of people that was sitting next to us. Right, just to see if it would work.
So you were going to be the energy vampire.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
So I was trying to see if I could achieve it, if I could actually do it. So I tried doing it, and I didn't tell anyone this at the table, but I just sort of focused my thoughts on the group next to us, and I started trying to visualize energy coming from one of the individuals to me. And what happened is my friend Jen she was talking to the guy she was with, her boyfriend. She stopped talking to him, and she looks at me and she goes, "What the hell are you trying to do?" And I'm looking at him like, nothing. And she goes, "No, you're doing something." I'm like, "I'm trying to get energy from the group beside you." He goes, "No, well, you're hitting me." Right? So she goes, "You're draining me."
That's crazy.
There you go. It is crazy.
But like she knew?
Yeah, and I didn't tell anyone I was doing this.
Wow.
I just sort of visualized it, and I started. It is very impressive. It was just kind of weird how she just she just stopped talking out of nowhere, and she looked at me and goes, "What the hell are you doing?"
Jesus.
And it was just one of those things. It's like, holy crap. Okay, fine. I won't do it around you then.
Was there any practice beforehand?
No. But this was just something I was experimenting with.
Okay.
Right? But I mean, it did work to some degree. I did gain some of that energy back.
Did you feel energized at all? Yeah, it did kind of work.
It did kind of work. I didn't feel like $1,000,000, if in that sense, but I did feel a little better. I started feeling a little bit more revitalized, and I also started doing some other visualization work because my friend Jen kept saying, after the fact, after she caught me doing what I was doing, and I was explaining to her that I was feeling kind of drained and that's why I was doing it. She explained to me that there's someone here who's actually doing this to you. She's basically draining you of your energy. So I just visualized sort of like a dome around me, almost like a protection circle, right?
Yeah.
So that whoever was attempting to do it wasn't able to do it.
Interesting.
And that sort of seemed to alleviate the problem.
So do you think, because I've always thought that energy vampires or psychic vampires, there's two kinds. There's those that just naturally do it without even thinking about it. You know, they just walk into a room and everyone gets all sluggish and I don't feel like doing nothing, you know, because they're in the room, because they're draining the energy. But there's no intent; it's all unconscious. And then there's the people who intentionally do it.
Correct.
You know, and Stutley Constable in the chat says, "Is that a reproducible experiment?" And that's a good idea. You know, just to try different scenarios and try and see if it works. You know,
the only thing is that, I mean, if you're trying to reproduce it like what happened with me and my friend Jen, and you have to know someone who's very good at sensing energies, that they can just sort of relate to you what they see and what they experience. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to have it done without telling that person. I know it sounds kind of, you know, because you want to be able to, I mean, my intent wasn't to sort of see if she could pick it up on it. My intent was literally trying to help myself revitalize. And I was trying to target the group next to us, at the table next to us, by, I guess, because of lack of practice. I was hitting her by accident, and she caught it, right? So if you want to reproduce it, you can definitely reproduce it. It's basically all visualization. You're visualizing whoever the target is. You're visualizing sort of their life energy. Typically, it ends up being like a bluish tinge, sometimes green. But you're visualizing that energy sort of flowing from them to you, to your core. And you could practice this with anyone who's willing or unwilling, depending on how good of a person you are, I guess. Yeah. And you just see if it helps you.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about the Highgate Vampire and Mr. Sean Manchester and David Farrant. Obviously, the only real experience I've had, I think all of us, is with David Farrant. We've all interviewed him many times. I met him on one occasion and interviewed him face to face. And then there's Mr. Manchester, who I've never interviewed, never met. I think on some message boards and stuff we've crossed paths occasionally. He sent me a couple of emails when I posted some pictures on my website a long time ago that were very kind of, you know, take them down immediately, you know, that kind of thing. So my interactions with him have been very, very few and far between. But even though they've been very few, they've always been negative.
That's all you ever hear.
Yeah. There's never been a positive interaction with Manchester, unfortunately. Whereas with Farrant, exact opposite. Every interaction with him was always very, very positive. He was always very willing to talk about any aspect of the case. He didn't hold anything back. You'd ask him anything, and he would gladly go over it with you and talk to you about it. And it's strange when you meet people in person. You always seem to get a vibe from them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And I have to say that when I met David in person, I got a very, very positive vibe from him. I got along with him immediately. He seemed like a genuinely good guy. I didn't get like the shady vibe or, you know, he's up to something or he's a bullshit artist. I didn't get none of that. Nothing. He seemed very, very legit. And I can't say the same for this dude. So this is a photograph of Sean Manchester in late 1960s, maybe 60, 68, 69, something like that. This was right at the beginning of the whole vampire scare, or the whole the beginning of when it really started to hit the news and started to go crazy. And here he is in the cemetery doing some kind of blessing. He has a crucifix around his neck, one in his hand, some garlic around his neck. And I find this picture fascinating on many, many levels. Because in this photograph, he must be in his 20s, right?
Yeah.
He's in his 20s. And he's dressed in a rather spiffy suit. And he's got, a nice haircut and everything. A little chubby. And yet, he's there with a cross and a crucifix in a cemetery where there are cameras filming him for the TV, proclaiming that he's banishing, an evil spirit or the vampire. And this picture to me just reeks of someone with an immense hunger for publicity and fame,
Yep.
or somebody who's mentally ill.
I think it's a bit from both columns there.
What do you guys think? What vibe do you get when you look at this thing?
I agree with what you're saying. It looks like he's an attention seeker, which is also why I think whenever someone talks bad about him, he attacks back immediately. Yeah. Because if he was legitimately searching for real life quote unquote vampires, and he truly believed it, and he was truly honest about what he did and what he didn't do, then there would be no reason for him to attack so vehemently.
Yeah.
Just because he does so immediately, like with the pictures, and with other people that obviously David as well, and other people who support David. It just proves to me that he's out to protect his very crystal-like lie.
Yeah.
Any sort of knock to that crystal palace will make it come tumbling down, and he doesn't want that to happen because he's had, so much notoriety as a result of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Here's another great picture that adds to the kind of publicity seeker / mentally ill vibe. And I've often wondered which one is really true. If he's just a genuine, a publicity whore out there to try and get his name and his story out there as best he can, or if he really believes this stuff and he's a bit mental.
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because it's got to be one or the other. In fact, I remember I asked David this question. I said, which one is it? And he laughed and he said, well, actually, Gareth, it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
What do you think when you see these photographs like this, Justin?
I right off the bat, I don't buy it at all. I mean, maybe if I was in my Christian perspective, 2 decades ago or so, I would probably buy it. But when you actually study any history on vampirism, it's not really Christian, related per se. I mean, there's vampirism that exists throughout the world. So right away, when I see anything related to Christianity that's being used against it, and especially someone who considers themselves a researcher in that particular field, it already throws me off because it's most definitely. I mean, there's maybe some base in it, like I think some lore is that Lilith was the original vampire. She gave birth to vampires, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. Yep. But besides all that, when you actually look at more of a cultural aspect of vampirism, it exists throughout the world in some form or another. So it's not really connected to Christianity per se. So when I see that off the bat, it kind of just rings to a charlatan, pretty much, or a showman, essentially, who's just using the garlic cloves and crosses to go ahead and be the vampire hunter.
Yeah, here's another good one. Look at this one. This is a great one too. Look at that. I just don't get. I mean, it's not like it's if you're going to a Halloween party or a costume party or something, or I kind of get it, but when you're not and you're dressing like this and I mean, he would probably said, I was an eccentric. Well, it's a bit mental, man. You don't think so?
Yeah.
I mean, look at this. It's just like...
No, he's really playing into it. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's some other pictures here where he's like hardcore. Let me see if I can find some good ones. Where is he?
Well, the thing is with all these people is if you're gonna lie about something, you either go all in,
Yes.
or you don't do it at all.
Correct.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to something like this.
Well, how about the time frame? I mean, during the 60s, they were mostly 70s, right? But some of the stories go back to the 60s. But during that time, you had no way to really validate any of that. So it's easy to be a charlatan and put these clothes on and present yourself as this without any question. Doing that now ain't gonna fly anymore, But during the 60s and 70s, man.
Even in the 70s, they had some form of forensic science.
True.
Yeah.
Granted, it wasn't, DNA based and it wasn't what have you, but they had some form of forensic science. If he did kill a quote unquote real vampire, unless this vampire evaporated, which I'm assuming that's what he'll probably tell you.
Oh, that's
for
exactly
the sake
what
of the
happened.
lie.
Yeah.
Right.
So he says.
But even if it does evaporate, you should have some leftover residue.
So the story is
Right.
that they tracked the vampire to Highgate Cemetery, and they found a tomb in the Lebanon Circle with one of the skylights were open. They hit Manchester, and one of his cohorts climbed in. Now this is all allegedly, right? Whether or not this happened is extremely unlikely, but he says it happened. And they climb into the tomb, and there's coffins in this tomb. And he noticed on the inscription outside the catacomb, there's a list of everyone who's interned in this tomb. And there's one extra coffin that doesn't add up to how many people should be in there. And they pulled. This coffin was very much out of place, different style, different color. It was a black coffin, big black coffin. And they opened the coffin up, and in there was the vampire. And they said, well, how do you know it was a vampire, not just like a corpse and he said, well, it looked like it'd just been dead for a day or two. It looked very, very fresh. So they put crucifixes in there and holy wafers and holy water, and they did a ritual, and then they left thinking that would contain the vampire. And then they went back again a few weeks or months later, and the coffin was gone. It had been relocated. And then they found it again, I think a year or two later, in a mansion in Highgate. He calls it a neo-Gothic mansion. And they go in there and they find the coffin in the basement of this derelict building. And they drag the coffin out of the basement out into the backyard, into the garden of this mansion. And the sun is just coming up. It's just daylight is approaching, and they crack open the thing, and the vampire's in there. And at that point, then Manchester stakes the vampire, and it immediately starts decaying into some, not dust, but like some gooey viscera in the casket. And then they pour gasoline over it, and they set fire to it, and it burns to ash. And he said that all that was left was the skeleton. And then they took all the bones from the skeleton, they ground it to dust, and they scattered the dust of the bones to the four winds. And that was the end of the Highgate vampire.
Problem solved.
Isn't it a great story?
Yeah.
It's a great story. But then it continues. Then there was another, like an offshoot of the Highgate vampire, I think in 1975 or 76, and I think it was in Finchley in the UK, where Manchester went to investigate. I think that was the one where the vampire turns into a giant spider in front of his eyes, and he stakes.
Oh, wow.
And he stakes the spider.
When was it
Wasn't
written?
that apparently his like assistant or something?
Yeah, it was.
who got possessed.
Yeah, Louisa, I think her name was one of the characters.
Yeah, it was like his. Yeah, it was something like that. I remember reading that. It was like I think his assistant that had gotten possessed by the spirit of the Highgate vampire, and she turned into this giant spider that he in turn killed.
I always remember there was a great interview where he mentioned, he says, well, the interviewer says, didn't one of these vampires turn into a spider? And he's like, oh yes. And he said, well, what kind of spider? And it was classic. He says, well, it wasn't an arachnid of the normal size. It was more the size of a large cat. And the interviewer says, well, that must have been a bit frightening. And he's like, oh yes, absolutely terrifying.
Has you ever seen those camel spiders?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
I had a Goliath bird eater once, a tarantula. I used to collect. I do collect tarantulas, but not as often as I do now.
Yeah.
But yeah, they get pretty big.
Can you imagine a spider the size of a cat?
That's huge.
Yeah,
that is huge.
That would scare the shit out of me.
I wouldn't be like, yes, it was terrifying.
He goes,
I would have been like, holy crap, yeah, it was huge.
But he has this wonderful way of speaking. I don't know if you've listened to interviews with him, where everything is like he's reading from an 18th century novel. You know, everything. You can ask him like a little, you know, like, hey, Sean, what did you have? What do you have for lunch yesterday? And he'll be like, the meat was cooked with the elaborate, and he would get into this. He's like he's reading fucking poetry over. You know what I mean? It's like, but what is wrong with you? Can you speak like a human being? But it's part of his charm. It's part of the act. And it's great to listen to it, but it's also hilarious. You know. Yeah. The way he kind of elaborates on stuff. You know, you can't just say like the vampire's, you know, the corpse. You'll say the corporeal body was encased in the wooden tube. It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Do you know what I mean? It's crazy. But I think after the 1970s were over, that's when the publicity machine really kicked in, because I think the first book came out in 1985, which was the first. I think I showed it to you last week, Bill. Well, this is the first edition of the Highgate Vampire book. This is the first one. This is the edition 1. This is the one I pulled this out last week, and then he was on the publicity rounds. And when he did that, he looked like this. This was this is when he became Reverend Sean Manchester. All right, this is when he was. Reverend, when he became a priest in the old Catholic Church. So when he would appear on talk shows and the like, he'd come in, you know, wearing the whole garb, right? He'd come in dressed as a priest. And the old Catholic Church it's not really recognized as a part of the Catholic Church, you know. So pretty much anybody, I mean, I could go and buy like a priest uniform and say, yes, I'm a reverend, and you know, who's going to say any different? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can just do whatever.
Are we gonna start calling you Bishop Gareth Davies?
Yes, call me Bishop. Yes, the Right Honourable Bishop. Yes.
That kind of rolls off the tongue a bit.
It does kind of. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. But and then he got into the publicity train, and I think it went out during the 80s and maybe the early 90s. He appeared on a ton of radio and talk shows, and there was always a lot of resistance. You know, I remember on one radio show, they were like, "Okay, let's go to the phone lines," and, you know, they some guy calls it, and they're immediately like, you know, all these English people calling in like, "You're mental, mate. There's something wrong with you. Bloody vampires, you're out of your mind." You know? And he was like, you know, and then he'd start repeating all this stuff, and it was wonderful. But like, there was very few callers that would call in and be like, "Oh, thank you so much for bringing this to the public's attention." Very, very few. It was more like, you know, what the fuck is wrong with you? But this is wonderful stuff, right? It's in this kind of craziness. You know, whether he's just a con man or he's mental or whatever, it's still great stuff. Don't you
Yeah,
agree?
yeah. Yeah, of
It's,
course, the stories, the sights of tall, ghostly men, shadows, and of course the eventually spiking a casket through the heart. I mean, those are all great things
uh-huh.
to read about. And that's what kind of got me into it, was the fantasticalness of it.
Yeah.
Originally, because it was just like, really, this is happening. This is really a case that happened. And of course, you read further into it, it's the occult aspect of it exists a lot longer, but yeah, the vampire aspect is the little more fantastical part of it, and you kind of just get taken away by it as you go further into it.
Yeah, it's great. Let's take a look at the other major player in this case. Let's look David Farrant. Now, the only difference here is that all three of us have spoken to David, and let's take a look at what he used to look like back in the day. Let me find my. There he is. That's what David looked like back in the 60s. And you can see here, he's also kind of playing the part, the publicity part, right? He's got the outfit on and the garb. He's got that vibe going on too. But I think for him, it was very much, let's see how much publicity I can get and how often I can get into the newspapers. Whereas Manchester was more like, no, this is real. We must defend ourselves from the malignant entity of the blood-sucking fiend, the spawn of Satan. That kind of thing. There's another good photo right here, which I'll pull up. Where let's see. Now these things also made the rounds big time in regard to the Highgate vampire. This is near the Lebanon Circle. You can see this lady scared and David running after her. But these were all staged publicity photographs. This was like from a student film or something that he took part in. And all these photographs then over the years were used in conjunction with the Highgate vampire story.
Yeah, many of the documentaries show these photos or just fantastic looking imagery.
Yeah.
That it's like we seen the bright eyes, and they show some picture with a demon looking thing with bright eyes and a shadow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let me find out. Here's another good one. This is also like a publicity still of David in his back in his vampire hunting days. This photograph I've seen hundreds of times on documentaries and the like, where he's holding a Bible and reading from a Bible and holding a crucifix. And all of this is just staged publicity pictures.
And he's holding it.
Yeah.
I was about to say he was holding it upside down, but it's just hanging from a chain.
Yeah, it's from a chain. Yeah, but yeah, these are all staged publicity pictures. Well, I guess I'm one of the few people who actually has a photograph of David, if I can find it here. Hang on, where he's actually smiling. And this is pretty amazing because you can never find no photograph exists as far as I know of David Farrant smiling. And there he is.
Oh, there is one now.
There's one now. And what happened here is this isn't actually a photograph. This is a still from the video interview I did with him. I had my camera on a tripod and I was filming him and asking him questions, and we were talking away. And when he died, his wife Della reached out to me, and she wanted to use a photograph during the ceremony, the service. She wanted to have it blown up, a photograph of David during the ceremony. And she could not find any photographs anywhere where he was smiling. And she asked me, I know you took photographs and film. Do you have anything where he's smiling? So what I did was I went through the video and paused the video because he smiled for like 2 seconds. And I paused the video and took the screen grab, and there it is, the only photograph of David Farrant smiling. I think they actually used that photo in his in his funeral.
Yeah, even the photos that I've seen of him just drinking it up,
Yeah.
talking, it's just kind of straight face, and you
Yeah.
don't see nothing else out there, no expressions.
Never smiling.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had a very different take on the Highgate vampire. His take was very much, there is absolutely something in Highgate. There really is. There's some kind of malignant force in the area, and there are paranormal events there.
Yes.
But it's not a blood drinking vampire.
Yeah, he focused more on the psychic aspect of the vampire
Right,
stuff, or the spiritual aspect.
Because he had I think he had 2 sightings of the entity or creature or whatever it is in the area, and it was very tall, dark, glowing
Yes.
eyes.
Yeah.
But multiple people have also seen this thing. And what I found very, very interesting was when I was at the Highgate Symposium in 2015, I think it was 2015. I'm not entirely sure. I think it was. And I was lucky enough to be one of the speakers at the symposium. And at the end towards the end, David came out and he said, "We have some witnesses in the audience." And 3 people came forward, three ladies, two younger ladies, 1 older lady. They didn't know each other, and they didn't see this thing at the same time. They saw it separately over many years' difference. And they came forward and told their stories where they witnessed this dark figure, usually a man with a top hat in the Swains Lane Northgate area of the Highgate Cemetery. And it was quite powerful. And one lady, I remember, when she was telling the story was so utterly terrifying to her that she actually broke down in tears during relating the story. And like I said earlier, Justin, when you meet someone, you get a vibe. Are they bullshitting? Are they up to no good? And the 3 of these people, I did not get the BS vibe at all. I got the vibe that they were all being very, very sincere in describing essentially what they'd witnessed and or experienced. And even though they didn't know each other, and they all had these experiences, years apart from each other, they all described something very, very similar. So it does seem like there is something in Highgate Cemetery, some kind of paranormal. I don't even know what to call it. I wouldn't call it a vampire, but maybe a ghost or some kind of entity that prowls the darkened paths throughout the night.
What I found interesting was that in the area, I don't know if you've noticed it, but there's power lines that run through there, and there's also I believe there's a Iron Man, the actual tower that runs the power lines. That's not too far from there, and I don't know how long has it existed, or anything like that, but I would assume maybe there's a possibility that just that existing within that area might charge it with EMF frequencies, maybe, and that's why maybe we see some of the things that we see.
I don't know. I mean, I have. Let me switch cameras here. Hang on a second. I have some of my.
I don't remember seeing that.
I don't remember seeing that either.
There was a video that I was watching before, and I think there was also a video that Della was on that she mentions it too. I have to find it. If I find it, I'll send it to you, Gareth, and maybe maybe I'm just mixing up 2 stories or something that she was mentioning. But yeah.
So I have some photographs here, which I've yet to. I mean, I've had these photographs for 20 years. I haven't even scanned. This was back when you used to take photographs. Remember that? We used to take like real photographs.
Going to Walgreens.
This was from This was from Highgate that we took when we went on the tour. There's like a gravestone with a dog on it, and this is the Lebanon Circle, and this is where the vampire resided. This is where it originally was, where he lived.
Very creepy.
Yeah. And here's the main.
I have the Lebanon Circle as my wallpaper on my
do you
computer.
here's
Yeah.
the entrance there, and you see we went in summer, so everything was very green and very lush.
It's actually beautiful there.
There's
So it's a great place, Justin. If you ever get the chance to go, I highly recommend it.
let's see. This is the main entrance as you walk in there. Well, these are just all like, but yeah, I don't know about you, Alex, when you went, but I got a very much a. Oh, this is a good one. This is hang on, let me see if I can find it. So we found. Oh, look at this. Look how cool I used to look. Look at that. Hey, what's up? Check it out. It's me. That was. I think that was on the London Eye, in the UK. But we found this because there's like a park right across the street from Highgate, and we found
Yes.
a tree that was burned from the inside out. And I'd never seen anything like this before. And we got this tree, and I told my wife to go stand inside it. And there's the tree. You can see that? It's all burned from the inside out.
Yeah.
And it was
I
hollow.
remember that part, but I don't think I saw that
maybe
tree though.
Maybe it was chopped down by the time you
possibly.
you went
Yeah.
over there. But I told her to go stand inside the tree, and then I set fire to it again. No, I'm kidding. Just
to finish the job,
just
right?
to finish the job, yeah. But yeah. So did you get that vibe too, Alex?
I did. I got the vibe I got when I was in there. To be perfectly honest with you, was a peaceful vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing of the sort where, anything was menacing. I did feel like there was a bit of heaviness in the area. Like, obviously, you're talking about a cemetery that's over 100 years old.
Uh-huh.
And it was. I mean, I love cemeteries. I love going for walks in cemeteries. And
Yeah.
any chance I get, I go for a walk in a cemetery, and I always find them extremely peaceful.
Yep.
This was no different. The only difference between, I'd say, this cemetery and any others, and that may be due in part because of the all the interviews that I had with David and everything else, but you almost kind of felt like there was something else there, more than just the people that were there.
Yeah, I would agree.
But that could just be also my mind playing tricks on me again, because going in there, I knew the story
Mhm.
of the Highgate vampire and everything that had transpired between Manchester and Farron.
Yeah.
So it could have been that.
Yeah, I knew the story also when I went in there, but I at that point I hadn't met David. I didn't know him, and years later when I told him that I'd been there and gone on the tour, he was like, "Oh, you should have contacted me. I would have come and given you a tour. We could have gone through it together. I would have gone with you." But that was back in the day when he was a lot more able. He was a lot more. I'm looking
Right.
very red. What's up with my color here? I'm not embarrassed. It's just the.
I think it's just the heat.
It might be.
Yeah.
It's very hot.
You're in hell.
It's very.
You in
very-
hell.
I'm changing some of the lights here. Maybe that'll fit. But it is. It's very very hot over here. Oh, I see what happened. Let me change the view. Hang on. Here. Say something, Justin.
Yeah. Well, actually, to the point you're talking about cemeteries here, I just recently visited St. James Cemetery in Lamont, Illinois, and although it has some vampires, it has a pretty dark history, as in what the lore was. And some of it included occult activity, seeing dark figures with glowing eyes, and what it's kind of known as is called Monk's Castle, because it was Catholic monks, I believe, that used to live there. And I finally went there after so many years, and it was beautiful. I mean, if you want to take a look, there's pictures on my LCGH on Twitter, as well as my Facebook group, the LCGH Research Group. Of course, look it up, St. James Cemetery in Lamont, Illinois. You'll read all sorts of info about it. So first time visiting it, and it was very peaceful. The only area that I got like a little weirdness to was towards the south end, where it's kind of on a hill, and there's some gravestones that are, it's not hidden, but you have to kind of walk under the, below the hill to see them. You can't see them above there, and that was really the only place that I got it. But all sorts of claims of paranormal activity for years, and I wonder if like the Highgate here, because of everything that's gone on, it adds to that. Just like, let's say for St. James, the claims of occult activity and seeing shadow figures might just add on top of everything else that has been going on for years there. But yeah, that's it's a very similar type of story. No vampires though, but very spooky in some of the aspects.
I mean, I often wish that the Manchester story was true. Don't you?
Of course. I wish I could battle monsters and vampires.
I would love it to be true. But
and collect ghosts in smoky quartz. I would love to. Yeah.
But last week on the show, we mentioned that when Manchester took the casket out of the basement of the neo-Gothic mansion and dragged it out into the backyard, into the garden area, cracked it open and saw the undead sleeping its slumber. He took photographs of it. And another thing, the way he uses flowery language, I remember on the radio show, he said, and he said, and there is film of this, and the interviewer says, "What? There's this film of the vampire?" And he says, "No, well, panchromatic stills." And it's like, you can't just say you got a fucking photo. You got to say panchromatic. What is? Are you mental? There are panchromatic.
Has he published those photos?
It's very. He has. So the photos, the photos exist in the original book, The Highgate Vampire, and in the reprint. And as I mentioned on the in last week's show, these are the two books that the Manchester made. This was the original that came out in 1985, and then there was this book that came out, I think, in like, what's the date on this? I don't even know if there's a date on it. I think it came out in like the early 90s, I want to say.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure where. Let's see. Yeah, 1991. This one came out in This book was published in 1991. This one here. This book is very easy to find. You just go onto eBay or Amazon, and you can pick this book up very, very, very easily. It's hardcover. It might be a little expensive, but I say it's worth it. It's a cool book. It's fun to read. Just think of it as a vampire novel, I guess. It's fun to read.
Yeah.
But this one, this is the super rare one. This is the one that's hard to come by. This is the original book, and I got the vibe that this book right here, the original, this is the one that he wants to pretend doesn't exist, because
what's the differences?
Well, there's a lot of differences. The story the story in this, while it's basically the same story as this one.
Yeah.
But there are significant differences in the narrative of this story compared to this one. So when he wrote this, he changed a bunch of stuff.
Wow.
As if to pretend that and there's a lot of photographs in the first one which are not in the second one. But both books show the photograph of the vampire. So I should ask you guys and the people in the chat, do you want to see an actual photograph of a real, let me do my fingers right, where's my hands, a real vampire?
Yes.
I do. Show it.
Have you not seen it for real? Seriously?
No, I haven't seen it.
I don't think I have either.
Okay. All right, so let me...
We're getting ready for this, guys.
Let me set the scene. Streams of daylight are piercing through the clouds as the sun begins to rise gloriously in the early morning air. Am I doing good?
You're really good. You're good, Gareth.
Keep going. It's sounding pretty good.
The casket, while heavy, was struggled and torn through the corridors and up the steps into the glorious sunshine as it bathed down. My assistant Arthur and I cracked open the lid containing this putrid evil. There we laid our eyes on the malignant monstrosity, the spawn of Satan himself, the vampire. Yeah, so now that I've set the scene, here it comes. Are you ready?
Let's see this.
All right. Okay. Oh, it's gonna be scary. Be careful. All right.
I gotta go to bed after this, so I don't want to have nightmares.
Be careful. Okay. Here it comes. Here it comes. An actual photograph.
Okay, Justin, I'll read you a lullaby
of the Highgate vampire. Here we go. Ah! There it is. Now, as you can see, this is several photographs, one in negative, of the creature in its casket as the sunlight begins to touch its face and his face begins to decay, and he snaps a few photographs. Moments later, a stake is plunged through its heart, and the casket and the body is engulfed in flame, never to be seen again.
It kind of looks like a James Brolin, something overly James Brolin's face.
So what do you guys, what do you think? Alex, you're looking intrigued. Give me your thoughts.
Kind of looks like a wax figure.
Okay. Anything else you want to add? Justin?
No.
The one on the left, I'm not sure what's the difference between that photo and the one on the right, where you have a little more features in there. But the one on the left looks more real than the one on the right.
Well, they're the same creature, allegedly. It's the same body or whatever, or vampire or corpse or whatever it is. He snapped a few photographs. One of them he's showing in, I think it's in negative, or when it's really
negative,
or when it's really starting to crumble into ash. He took that picture. But there's two. So it's a photograph of the same person / vampire / creature. It's not like there was a bunch of different people. Let me pull it up again so you can have another look.
Yeah. So one is essentially more decayed version of the other.
Right. And you can see in this, it looks like there's several photographs here stacked on top of each other, and then one photograph taken of the pile of photographs. Right.
There you go.
You see it?
Okay, yeah, I see it. So I guess the negative is kind of to show that it's real, I guess.
Well, it's just the multiple pictures, I guess, lying on top of each other.
The one that's not negative, it looks a little more unreal compared to the one that is negative. So if I did see that right off first glance, it almost looks fake, to be honest with you. But yeah, that is. And where was this vampire located at?
In Highgate.
Just chilling, or was he in a coffin, or what was the story on that?
Were you not listening to my very detailed explanation?
I don't think I was listening
before we got. Come on, man. I gave like a full performance there.
Yeah, he did. So,
and
it doesn't look real. I'm sorry.
It doesn't, for sure. On that one that's not negative, it looks fake. It does.
Here's a picture from the other book, where it says, the decomposing vampire, moments after exorcism, the undead condition quickly passed away, and the corporeal body returned to normal time when captured on film was made possible. Jeez. And there he is. Now, I'm gonna throw some stuff into the mix here in a minute. I'm trying to find some good pictures. I found one, and I don't know if you can Maybe we could put these together. Let me do a little hocus pocus here.
Oh yeah, that picture right now has a little bit more context to it.
Yeah, that's from the original book, the original the 1985 book, where you can see that a little better.
Studley's saying teeth don't look the same from the other photo.
Right.
I wonder if that's just from the negative at all.
So, a couple of things I want to throw up there just to kind of whet your appetite. I'm going to show two pictures now, one of the vampire, one of something else. And I want you to look very carefully and tell me if you can see any similarities. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. You see any similarities there between these two photographs? What do you think?
Waiting for it to come through.
Okay.
There we go. Oh wow, I do see similarities.
Any similarities there at all?
It's not James Brolin, that's for sure.
No, but you know who that is right there, right? That's
Sean Manchester.
Yeah,
exactly. That's Mr. Manchester himself.
Wow.
So it's highly likely, if not, very probable, that with some stage makeup and the like, he took some photographs of himself and attempted to pass them off as the vampire.
That's you can't really right? You can't not compare the two like this. This is ridiculous. How did we not see this before? Thank you, Gareth, for putting it together like that.
That's great. And there's another one which is going to come up in a second here, which is going to blow your guys' minds too. That's in the mid 1970s also, Manchester made a home movie. You can tell he was very much into horror movies at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a film. And here's the photo advertising the film. Can you see this?
It's about to load up here.
And this is probably where he acquired his costumes and his stage makeuping techniques.
Oh yeah.
Interesting stuff.
The Vampire Exhumed.
Yes, by Sean Manchester. I mean, this is great stuff, man. This is like this is a movie in itself.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, even during this time, there was really no other vampire, claims or lore going on. So when this hit, it just was like it took off.
Well,
it really took off.
There was, and we touched on this last week, but the popular culture at that time in the mid '60s through the mid 1970s, vampires and the occult was very much mainstream popular culture.
Yep.
I mean, if you look at the things that would be in the cinema at that time, it was all like, Taste the Blood of Dracula, The Scars, all these horror movies.
Or Blackula.
Blackula, yeah. And they were extremely popular, right? Very popular, huge, big money makers. Yeah. So vampires were very, very much in the public eye. So it's understandable why people would be involved in that,
Yeah, eating it up.
Yeah.
Just reading a comment from Evil Earl. He said he would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you meddling podcasters.
Like Scoob! Zoinks! Yeah. There's like a ghost right behind me.
Horrible Scooby-Doo impression.
Like Scoob, I'm really hungry, Scoob. Yeah, there you go. Jinkies! Yep. I've lost my glasses. Even we're joking around with Scooby-Doo, but Scooby-Doo was a huge cartoon, right?
True.
Super popular. And what was that all about? It was about the occult.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
ghosts and vampires and witches,
Yep.
and every week. And it was a kids show, so you can see
Yep.
the way the culture was back then. So it's not that big of a stretch that people would be
True.
really into vampires and making their own vampire movies and the like. So Alex, as you've never seen these photos and this evidence before, and now you've been presented to you, what's your take?
It's all a hoax.
Well, I think we kind of knew that before we even started the show, but having seen all that,
that comparison picture you showed of Manchester and a vampire, that sort of seals the deal.
Yeah, seriously. Has anyone even made that comparison at all? Is this, I mean, this is the first time.
Yeah, no,
okay, right.
I did not come up with that. No.
Darn it, Gareth.
No. I did not come up with that. That's been making the rounds for years.
Well, it's new to me.
Yeah.
That's like the first time I've ever seen that comparison. That's ridiculous.
But yeah, great stuff. We're kind of running out of vampire steam, I think, folks. I think we've done all we can with the Highgate thing. I've shown all the photographs. Well, there's lots more photographs, but none of them as powerful as what I just showed you.
Yeah.
Anything we want to add before we call it a day?
I'm waiting for part 2 of the Highgate story.
Part 3 we should do now. No, let's not do part 3. I think we've done it to death.
No. I'm talking about from Sean Manchester.
Oh yeah.
He goes hunting. He's hunting the offspring.
Yeah.
There you go.
You know what's weird?
Son of vampire.
He's very much in the last 20 years, 25 years. He's very much taken a back seat. He's not nearly as in the public eye as he used to be. And I know a lot of people have requested interviews with him or written to him, and he's always politely declining. And I think he kind of realizes, you know what, that ship sailed. If I come out and start talking about this, I'm going to look like a fucking buffoon.
Yeah, it's not the same anymore.
So he's kind of
even more so.
Yeah. Well, you know what I mean. I mean, there was like a window of opportunity where he could kind of get away with it. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
But I think that that window over the years has been getting smaller and smaller, and now it's like, he's like, come on, dude, what is wrong with you? So he's
some of the videos.
Mm-hmm.
They have evidence of all sorts of things, from orbs to weird blotches, and a lot of that was over 20 years ago.
Right.
Them presenting it as such. Now we don't even have that or dialogue anymore.
Yeah,
we don't. Everything's pretty questionable, so it would be hard to sit here and continue, that pretty much that lore into the 2000s right now.
So yeah, he's very much taken a back seat. Dropped off all media. You barely see him online anymore, posting his comments of antagonism, and he's kind of fallen into the shadows. But
maybe his health is not that well either.
Who knows, man? I mean, I know he's getting up there in age now, right? He's not a young man anymore, so it's completely possible. Who knows? But this story, we talked about this last week, but this story of the Highgate vampire, it's begging to have the definitive book written or the definitive movie. It's the whole story is very cinematic, and I'm not talking about the vampire. I'm talking about the Manchester Farron. Those two characters would be phenomenal. Like a really, really good factual book detailing everything would be wonderful. And
a Blumhouse movie, a Blumhouse production.
A movie would be amazing. Can you imagine?
Seriously. Yeah.
A period piece set in swinging London in the 60s. With all this going on, it would be phenomenal. But whether or not that'll happen, who knows? I just think there's a great story here, and I'm just glad that we're doing our little bit to get it out there into the public, because even though it's not true, it's still wonderful. It's still a great story, and it's I'm very, very happy to be a part of it, and to have met David and hung out with him and spoken to someone who face to face, who was actually there, and was an integral part of the entire saga. Truly, truly fascinating.
Well, I mean, there's even just the supernatural aspect. There's still a lot, just
Yeah,
overall
yeah.
what has happened legally and everything. Even what was it? David was in jail for
Yep.
3 years,
Yeah,
right? Something like
he
that.
went to
Yeah.
prison, yeah, for
witchcraft.
witchcraft.
Laws for witchcraft.
mhm.
Yeah.
In the cemetery.
And yeah, it's ridiculous that you can even get away with,
He
or
was-
not get
well,
away.
he, well,
but
he
that's-
was. I think he was
yeah.
engaging in like sex magic in a cemetery.
Yeah, there's
And
there's all
he
sorts
was
of
he was
stories
up
like-
to his stuff, and the cops showed up.
Yep.
And
That's
that-
the only reason why I want to join some cult or something.
well, you know what, you say that. I think
Yeah, the authorities
I
kind of
think,
frown on that.
I think a lot of
Yeah.
people get into that stuff just because it's like, oh, there's naked women.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where do I sign, baby?
I
Yeah.
know, someone's heart gets
So-
broken.
So Justin, you should follow Crowley then.
Yeah, there you go.
You know?
Well, I gotta at least go to France and leave myself in some chateau, plateau,
You should
chateau
get in-
for.
what is it? What's it?
He had
Thelema? Thelema? Is that what it is?
He had a
Yes.
sorry,
Thelema.
Thelema.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, the Lima, yeah.
Do
that's,
it thou
but he-
wilt.
Exactly. So Crowley had a villa in Italy as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I gotta get that going. So I could just retire for a bit and just do practice magic all year long.
Well, just
Sex magic, right?
if you ever get that villa in Italy, and you want to do it like a timeshare deal, let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. All right. All
And
right.
we'll check it out.
Well, I was looking at property in Southern Illinois. It's pretty cheap. We might maybe accomplish it.
Hey,
It's-
I got one better for
Southern
you.
Illinois is not Italy. Calm down.
I got one better for you. There are towns in Italy right now that they're trying to revitalize the population because
wow.
the population is aging and have died off and
Yeah.
what have you. They are literally selling houses for €1.
What?
Yeah.
That doesn't make
down
sense.
Then yeah.
No, and a lot of them, and you'd think, okay, what's the catch, right? So these are probably like desolate, decrepit
Yeah.
kind of buildings, and I actually saw something on TV about that today. A lot of them, although they do need renovations, are not decrepit. They are livable, but if you want to modernize them, obviously you're going to have to do some renovations. But because they're so desperate to bring people back to these towns and sort of revitalize the towns, the city halls or the town halls are literally selling off these properties for €1.
Wow, that's insane.
We should. I know we could afford it, but we should just still get a GoFundMe.
Yeah, just for the renos.
Yeah, well, I mean, secretly, I've always wanted like an experimental place,
call
because
it,
as we've talked about here,
you call
our
it,
spouses, they're kind of frown upon those.
You call
things,
it
so-
Justin's Thelema Sex House
Yes.
Yeah.
in Italy. All right, well, guys, I think we've kind of come to the end of our Highgate Spectacular over 2 weeks. I think we covered a lot of the story, but there's still a lot that's out there. But I'll leave that to the viewers if you want to dig a little deeper and get into it. There's lots of books available. You can go to Amazon, eBay, and find all the books and read them, or do some research online and find out if you've been bitten by the Highgate bug or the Highgate vampire, so to speak. You can get into that and enjoy it. It's a great story. I'd also like to ask you, if you have not already, please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, hit the like, share, all that good stuff. Let people know. And we'll be back next week with another topic, which is yet to be determined. Let's see what everyone's got going on. I know Steve couldn't make it today, unfortunately. His computer started acting up. Alex, anything happening with you this week? Anything cool?
No, just working and trying not to sweat my balls off.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's very hot, man. The heat's getting crazy.
Yeah.
Justin,
But I mean, I did want to add. I know Steve will be adding more and more of the classic Nocturnal Frequency Radio shows up on YouTube as well, and some of them will have David Farrant as the
cool.
guest. So
Awesome.
if anybody's interested, head on over there as well to YouTube, to our channel there, and subscribe to that channel. And when he releases them, you can listen to some of the old archives that we where we interviewed David.
Perfect. Justin, what you got?
Yeah. I will be recording another episode for LCGH. We got a couple things coming up there. And if you haven't checked it out, please tune into the anonymousradiolnetwork.net because I do have new shows on there with a whole new thing. We got Brain Vomit for one, which is just a more of a philosophical take from one of the hosts there, and an anime podcast. If you guys are interested in anime, check that out too. So most definitely tune into that. AnonymousRadioNetwork.net or AnonymousRadioNetwork.podbean.com.
Awesome. And also don't forget to go over to MindsetCentral.com, where that's where I host all my podcasts. Justin was just on it on Sunday. We had a great time. We
Yes.
had a good 2-hour chat about all manner of things. You can go check that out there. But that about wraps it up, guys. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for watching. And we'll be back next Monday on Mindset Live with another topic where we discuss the strange, the wonderful, and the bizarre. Goodbye, all.
Good night.
Have a good night.
See ya.